In the early months of 332 BC, a 24-year-old Macedonian king named Alexander stood on the jagged rocky shores of ancient Phoenicia, looking out across the dark turquoise waters of the Mediterranean Sea. He was facing the single greatest tactical obstacle of his life. Just half a mile off the mainland sat the island city of Tyre, the impregnable naval jewel of the Phoenician world, and a fortress that had successfully defied every conqueror who had ever attempted to bring it to its knees. To the modern mind, Alexander the Great is often remembered as an invincible force who simply swept through Asia, winning effortless battlefield victories through raw charisma and swift cavalry charges. But history is rarely that simple. Alexander was currently deep inside a high-stakes asymmetric military operation. He had just smashed the Persian king Darius III at the Battle of Issus, but his operational position remained terrifyingly fragile. Alexander possessed no significant navy of his own. His entire military machine was built on ground-based infantry and elite shock cavalry. Meanwhile, the Persian Empire controlled a massive, professional armada of hundreds of heavily armed Phoenician warships that dominated every sea lane in the Mediterranean. Alexander realized that if he marched his army further inland toward the heart of Persia, the Persian fleet could simply launch a massive counter-amphibious invasion behind his lines. They could seize Greece, cut off his supply lines, and leave his entire army permanently stranded in hostile territory. Alexander's strategic solution was brilliant, counterintuitive, and incredibly risky. He decided he would defeat the Persian navy on dry land. He would systematically march down the coast, seize every single naval base, and strip the Persian fleet of their home ports one by one. Every city along the coast surrendered in terror, until Alexander reached Tyre. The Tyrians did not fear the Macedonian king. They had spent centuries engineering their island into an absolute maritime nightmare. The city was surrounded by massive towering limestone walls that rose 150 feet straight out of the crashing ocean waves. It possessed two highly fortified inner harbors, a massive professional navy, and enough grain, fresh water, and military supplies to withstand a continuous siege for over 5 years. When Alexander's diplomatic envoys arrived by boat to demand a peaceful surrender, the Tyrians simply executed the heralds on top of the battlements and hurled their bodies into the sea. The Tyrians believed they were completely safe, protected by a half-mile moat of deep, treacherous ocean water. They believed that no ground army could ever reach them, and that Alexander would eventually be forced to abandon the coast when winter arrived. They did not understand that Alexander did not care about the laws of geography. If the ocean stood between him and his destiny, he would simply erase the ocean. Alexander refused to retreat. He gathered his senior generals, his engineers, and his architects on the mainland shore and announced a military engineering project of unprecedented, insane scale. They were going to build a massive 200-foot wide stone land bridge, a mole stretching half a mile through the deep ocean water, directly from the mainland to the island walls of Tyre. The operation began with a relentless, mechanical rhythm. Alexander's engineers systematically demolished the ancient abandoned ruins of old Tyre on the mainland, using thousands of tons of heavy stone blocks, gravel, and dirt to fill in the shallow coastal waters. To secure the sides of the mole against the powerful Mediterranean currents, workers dragged massive cedar trees from the nearby mountains of Lebanon, driving the trunks into the ocean bed to form a structural wooden framework. At first, the work progressed with terrifying speed. Alexander himself stood in the mud alongside his ordinary soldiers, carrying heavy rocks on his back and handing out gold coins to the fastest laborers. The Macedonians built a highly efficient logistics loop. Caravans of wagons transported stone to the edge of the mole 24 hours a day, pushing the land bridge closer and closer to the island fortress. But as the mole pushed past the shallow waters and entered the deep channel, the operation hit a wall of absolute physical resistance. The ocean depth plummeted to nearly 20 feet, requiring exponentially more material to gain a single foot of ground. Simultaneously, the powerful underwater currents began to violently rip away the loose dirt and gravel, threatening to dissolve the entire land bridge into the sea. Then the Tyrians struck. The island defenders realized that this was no longer a standard siege. It was a battle of engineering endurance. The Tyrian navy deployed their light, agile warships along both sides of the raw land bridge, launching continuous volleys of flaming arrows, heavy stone ballista bolts, and boiling oil down upon the exposed Macedonian workers. The construction site turned into a horrific blood-soaked slaughterhouse. Laborers were pinned down, unable to carry stone, while dodging a non-stop rain of metallic projectiles from the sea. Alexander adapted instantly. He ordered his carpenters to build 2 colossal multi-story wooden siege towers, over 150 feet tall, and wheel them straight to the absolute edge of the mole. The towers were covered in thick raw animal hides to protect them from flaming arrows, and they housed heavy catapults on the upper decks. For the first time in history, a ground army was using mobile artillery towers to return fire against a navy, forcing the Tyrian warships to retreat from the sides of the land bridge. The Macedonians picked up their tools and began to build again, their eyes locked on the towering stone walls that were now just a few hundred yards away. The Tyrian engineers watched the approach of Alexander's massive siege towers with growing anxiety. They realized that if those towers reached the base of their walls, the Macedonian infantry would breach the battlements within days. The Tyrians needed to neutralize Alexander's heavy artillery, and they designed an incredibly sophisticated, terrifying counter-operation to do it. They constructed a massive naval fireship, a hellship. They took an old, heavy transport vessel and packed its hull with hundreds of barrels of pitch, sulfur, cauldrons of chemical oil, and dry tinder wood. They modified the masts of the ship, attaching heavy double-pronged cauldrons filled with liquid fire to the yards, engineered to swing forward and burst on impact. Finally, they weighted the stern of the vessel so heavily that the prow lifted high out of the water, allowing it to glide straight up onto the rocks of Alexander's mole. On a morning when the wind blew fiercely toward the mainland, 2 Tyrian rowers steered the hellship directly toward the edge of the land bridge. They pulled the vessel to maximum speed, ignited the chemical fuses in the hull, and jumped into the freezing ocean just before impact. The flaming ship crashed violently into the end of the mole, wedging itself directly between Alexander's 2 massive artillery towers. The impact shattered the chemical cauldrons, spraying a torrent of unquenchable liquid fire across the wooden frameworks. Within seconds, both 150-foot siege towers were transformed into roaring columns of infernal heat. As the Macedonian soldiers scrambled in panic to escape the flames, the entire Tyrian fleet launched a coordinated full-scale naval raid against the sides of the mole. Thousands of Tyrian sailors landed on the land bridge, ripping down the protective wooden palisades, slaughtering the engineers, and throwing the remaining stone equipment into the deep ocean. In less than an hour, 7 months of grueling Macedonian engineering labor was completely systematically wiped out. The mole was a smoldering broken ruin of charred wood and scattered stone, half submerged beneath the waves. Alexander's senior generals openly begged him to abandon the operation, pack up the army, and march toward Egypt. The operational momentum had shifted completely into the hands of Tyre. Alexander stood amidst the smoking ruins of his land bridge, looking out at the cheering Tyrian defenders on the walls. He did not panic. He did not yell. He simply realized that his tactical equation was missing a critical component. You cannot defeat a sovereign naval power without a navy of your own. Alexander temporarily halted construction on the mole and rode out along the coast of Phoenicia, launching an aggressive, high-stakes diplomatic campaign. He visited the newly conquered cities of Sidon, Byblos, and Aradus. He pointed out to their rulers that Tyre was now completely isolated, and that if Alexander succeeded, whoever helped him now would inherit Tyre's massive global trade monopolies. His strategic gamble paid off perfectly. The Phoenician kings, realizing that Alexander was a force that would never stop, rebelled against their Persian masters and turned their fleets over to the Macedonian king. Simultaneously, the island kingdom of Cyprus sent another 120 warships to join his cause. Within weeks, Alexander had assembled a massive, hyper-deadly allied armada of over 224 professional warships. When the Grand Fleet arrived at the shores of Tyre, the Tyrian defenders looked down from their 150-foot walls and felt their blood turn to ice. The naval balance of power had flipped in a single afternoon. Alexander's fleet instantly blockaded both of Tyre's harbors, completely trapping the Tyrian navy inside their own docks and cutting the city off from all foreign food and military reinforcement. With the sea finally secured, Alexander ordered his engineers to build a new, even wider mole, while his shipwrights pioneered a radical naval mutation. They lashed pairs of transport ships together, laid heavy wooden decks across them, and mounted massive iron-headed battering rams and heavy catapults directly onto the floating platforms. Alexander was no longer just building a road to Tyre. He was transforming the entire ocean surface into a floating siege engine. The floating rams sailed straight to the base of the island walls, their heavy iron heads slamming rhythmically against the ancient limestone foundations day and night, sending deep, structural vibrations through the stone houses of the city. The ticking clock for Tyre had officially begun. In July of 332 BC, after 7 long months of brutal, unbroken deadlock, the island fortress finally fractured. Alexander's floating battering rams successfully smashed open a narrow, jagged breach in the seawall along the southern face of the city. Alexander did not watch the assault from a safe distance on the mainland. He stood at the absolute front of the landing barge, wearing his gleaming bronze armor and a distinctive white-plumed helmet. The moment the gangplank dropped against the broken stone of the breach, Alexander was the first man to leap into the gap, his long sword cutting through the Tyrian elite guard as he carved out a secure landing zone for his Macedonian phalanx divisions. The Macedonian infantry poured through the breached wall into the city like a dam breaking. The Tyrians fought with the absolute desperation of a dying civilization, defending every narrow alleyway and throwing heavy stone roof tiles down upon the invaders from their terraces. But they were completely overwhelmed by the sheer disciplined fury of Alexander's veteran ground forces. The sacking of Tyre was total and merciless. Alexander was deeply enraged by the execution of his diplomats and the 7 months of psychological and physical frustration his army had endured. Over 8,000 Tyrian citizens were killed during the immediate assault. The remaining 30,000 women, children, and elderly survivors were rounded up in the public squares and sold directly into slavery, effectively erasing the ancient Tyrian demographic from the Mediterranean landscape. Alexander ordered his soldiers to crucify 2,000 young Tyrian men along the miles of beaches as a permanent, terrifying psychological warning to any other city that contemplated defying his will. To celebrate his total victory, Alexander marched his army into the grand temple of Melkart, offered a lavish sacrifice to Hercules, and dedicated the very Tyrian fireship that had burned his towers to the god of war. The fall of Tyre altered the physical and geopolitical map of the ancient world forever. The massive land bridge that Alexander built, the mole, never dissolved back into the Mediterranean. Over the centuries, the shifting ocean currents deposited millions of tons of sand and sediment against the stone foundations, gradually transforming the ancient island fortress into a permanent peninsula. Today, the modern city of Tyre in Lebanon sits directly on top of the road that Alexander built through the ocean 3,000 years ago. The Siege of Tyre stands as a definitive, timeless monument to the power of human willpower, strategic adaptation, and engineering audacity over seemingly impossible geographic odds. It reminds us that the boundaries, barriers, and obstacles we believe are permanent and absolute are often only as strong as our lack of imagination. Alexander's operational triumph sends a powerful echo across 23 centuries. When you are faced with an obstacle that cannot be bypassed, you must possess the courage to completely rewrite the geography of the world. The stones of the ancient world have a story to tell, but they only speak to those who listen. If you want to uncover the high-stakes strategy, the lost operations, and the brutal survival stories that shaped our modern world, walk through the gates of history with us. Subscribe to Ancient Chronicles, turn on your notifications, and join us in the comments below. Do you think Alexander's siege of Tyre was history's greatest feat of military engineering? Until the next chronicle, stay curious and stay vigilant.